We are now just one day away from the Bulls playing their first playoff game since 2017. And as I'm sure you all know, the Bulls will be taking on the Bulls tomorrow in Milwaukee, Game 1 for the first round of the playoffs. And with the Bulls being off really for the entire week, it's given me a lot to think about this upcoming series. Maybe too much to think about. And although, yes, I do think the Bucks are going to win this series. I've said that before. I think they're likely going to win it in 5 games. But if you caught my video from yesterday, which I'll leave linked at the end of this video, I had talked about how there was one thing the Bulls have in their favor over the Bucks, and that's that the Bulls have very little to lose in this series compared to the Bucks. And there's not a ton of pressure on them because no one is expecting them to win this series. That being said, though, there are a few players in particular that have a lot riding on them in how they show up in this series. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a few of these players for which the series is going to be important as it relates to their future with the team, and more specifically, who is going to be the X factor for the Bulls in this series. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, as much as people would say that this is going to be a boring series, that the Bulls don't stand a chance against the Bucks, and that there really isn't a ton to be looking out for in it, I would beg to differ in that there's actually a lot riding on this series for some of the guys on the Bulls roster. Zach Lavine is probably the biggest one, given he's going to be a free agent this offseason, and this will be his first playoff appearance in 8 years. And because Zach has struggled at the end of the season, partially from that lingering knee issue that has been bothering him, a lot is riding on how he shows up in the playoffs going into the offseason to really prove that he is worth a max contract. For Lavine, it's going to be trying to end this narrative that he's an empty stats player who can't play defense and whose game does not translate to winning, which isn't really fair or true, but that's how some analysts and fans view him as a player. Another guy is obviously DeMar DeRozan, considering that most people remember DeMar, in the playoffs anyway, as the guy that frequently went missing back in his days with the Raptors. And of course, you had all the nicknames come out like DeMar DeFrozen, DeMar DeChokeson, even though, again, not entirely fair because the guy just ran into LeBron James on countless occasions. And when he was traded, LeBron went out west, which enabled the Raptors to make it out of the East. And of course, because they also got Kawhi Leonard. So for DeMar, this series will be important to how he's viewed, as you don't want to reignite the DeMar DeFrozen jokes. For other guys like Coby White, Patrick Williams, I mean, it's a big series for them as well, considering it's also their playoff debut. They're young and trying to prove their worth on the biggest stage, especially since Coby will be extension eligible this offseason. For Patrick, it's an important one because I think the Bulls are really going to need to rely on him to at least try and stop Giannis. No one can stop Giannis, we all know this, but at least have a bigger body defender on Giannis than someone like Javonte Green or Alex Caruso. Not only that, but I think Patrick is going to be a big piece needed on offense as a third or fourth scoring option since Lonzo Ball isn't going to be available. And it's also an important series for Patrick because he's missed so much time this season that for him to really showcase what he can do and his potential as he looks for a contract extension in the next year is going to be important. But there was one player in particular who I believe has the most riding on him in this playoff series and who I believe is the X factor in this series for the Bulls, and that's Nikola Vucevic. And I know some of you will probably roll your eyes at that statement because I've kind of been reiterating that all year, that Vucevic, yes, Vucevic is the X factor for this team. Now, what is actually an X factor? We hear this term all the time, oh, so-and-so is an X factor for this team's success, but like, what does that really mean? Well, in scientific terms, an X factor is a variable in a given situation that could have the most significant impact on an outcome. Now, I know right off the bat, some of you will say, well, Vucevic isn't our most impactful player, not even close. That's DeMar DeRozan, and in some instances, Zach Lavine. So what the hell are you talking about right now? But the most impactful player or the best player is not always going to be the X factor on a team. Is the person who is likely going to have the most impact in a particular situation. And in this situation, we're obviously talking about this series against the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, here's the thing with Vucevic. He has underperformed as a whole this season, at least relative to how he's performed as a player in his career. Like, I think we can all agree on that. And Vucevic has had some pretty bad games this season, where he was even of liability at times. But there were also some great games for Vucevic in which he was scoring in the paint, cleaning up the glass, even hitting his outside shots, being an effective playmaker in the post. And in those games where Vucevic played at his best, the Vooch from his Orlando days that we traded for 2 first-round picks and Wendell Carter Jr. for, when that Vooch showed up, the Bulls were dominant. Case in point, some of the Bulls' best games this season Like when they played Charlotte earlier in the year, Vuce went for 30 points on 12 for 19 shooting, 6 for 6 from 3 to go along with 14 rebounds, 5 assists, as well as 2 blocks. That epic comeback against Boston early in the year, Vucevic didn't score as much, but he nearly had a triple-double going 11, 10, and 9. And then the win against the Mavericks, 18 and 10 on 57% shooting. The blowout win in Atlanta, Vucevic went for 24 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 blocks. The next game against the Hawks, also another blowout win for the Bulls, Vucevic goes for 16 points, 20 rebounds, and 3 steals. A blowout win against the Blazers, 24 points on 73% shooting to go along with 14 rebounds. A win against the Pacers, 36 points, 17 rebounds, 4 assists, and also 3 blocks. And again, 76% shooting for those 36 points. Again, I know Vucevic has had some bad games this year, and really, as a season overall, he fell below expectations. But when he was on, the Bulls were at their best. Now, going into this series against the Milwaukee Bucks, who are a significantly bigger team than the Bulls are, with guys like Giannis, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Serge Ibaka, Chris Middleton, the Bulls are severely undersized against the Bucks. That's also what makes Vucevic so much more important and impactful in this series, is that he's really one of the few guys on this roster who can actually battle in the paint for rebounds against all of the bigs that Milwaukee has. Yes, Patrick can rebound as well, which again, he's going to be an important piece for the series. Tristan Thompson, sure, a strong player who will fight inside to get boards, but he's not going to be getting significant minutes in this series. DeRozan and Lavine are decent rebounders for their size as guards, but still, when you're going up against the size and athleticism that the Bucks have, you're going to have to rely on your bigs more to clean the glass, and that sits on Vucevic. The other thing that is going to be so critical to the Bulls' success in this series is not just relying on their outside shooting, because the Bulls have been so hot and cold when shooting from deep this season, especially Vucevic, who did not shoot the ball well from 3, finishing the season shooting 31.4% from behind the arc. So rather, the Bulls need to be feeding Vucevic the ball more in the post. And for Vucevic, he needs to actually execute and score in the paint when he is being fed the ball, because the thing with Vucevic is that some of his struggles this season was that, maybe he wasn't being utilized to the fullest in most games, but there were also times where the Bulls were going to him more, and he disappointed by continually bricking shots. That cannot happen in a series like this. Vucevic needs to be 100% on his game for all of these games. He's more or less our only big, and we need him to show up at the all-star level player that we traded for when he was putting up 25 and 12 on a nightly basis. Also, the other thing is the Bulls need his scoring. Like, we can't have Vucevic putting up 7 points, 6 points, 9 points like we saw him doing down the stretch of this season. No, we need him as that third scoring option. Because as I've said time and time again, DeMar and Zach are going to get doubled in this series. Teams know that if you double DeMar and Zach, the Bulls can't win. And the problem with relying so much on DeMar and Zach is that, well, one, both of them get a bit of tunnel vision and try to do too much by taking over the game without any ball movement whatsoever. But two, when you rely on these guys so much and teams are doubling them to limit their scoring, no one else is stepping up on the offensive end. And that's where the Bulls need Vucevic to be putting up close to 20 points per game. That way, the Bucks defense is forced to take some of their attention away from DeMar and Zach to draw away those double teams and have another scoring threat. And in general, just mixing it up a bit and throwing the defense off guard by not always going to Zach Lavine, DeMar DeRozan. And then finally, the other reason Vuce is the X factor in this series is because, aside from Giannis getting his, because he will, there isn't much that you can do about that, you also need to ensure a guy like Brook Lopez doesn't go off, because he can heat up on offense. Like we saw in the last game these two teams met in the regular season. Don't let Brook Lopez be the X factor for the Bucks as another scoring threat and piece that can help spread the floor. Vucevic has got to be active on the defensive end as well in getting out to the three-point line to defend Lopez. Lopez had way too many open looks in their last game, and why he went off for 28 points on 9 for 14 shooting, while Vucevic had 7 points, shooting a putrid 3 for 19 from the floor. Like, it doesn't matter how well DeMar, Lavine, even Patrick Williams, Ayo, or Coby play in this series. If Vucevic is having those kind of performances against the defending champions and not even able to compete against the likes of Brook Lopez, it's over for the Bulls, and it's going to be a short series. This is Vucevic's chance in this series to step up, be that all-star that we traded for, and really make up for the otherwise underwhelming season that he had, to be that X factor that can be the difference in the Bulls making this a competitive series rather than just getting embarrassed in 4 games. And we talked about how important this series is for some of the other guys on the roster. That also applies to Vucevic. Vucevic is going to be entering the final year of his deal, which will be to the tune of $22 million. And if Vucevic doesn't show up well in this series, first of all, he won't be getting a contract extension, which he would be eligible for. And second, he could very well be on the chopping block as an expiring contract that the Bulls could look to move to free up some cap space going into this offseason. This is a big series for Vucevic, and it's essential for the Bulls' success that he plays to the highest level possible. What do you guys think, though? Who do you think is the X factor for the Bulls going into this series? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget, I'll have a live chat for the game tomorrow, so feel free to join in on that with the rest of the community if you'd like. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.